Like, it's considering the offer, but it's a massive upping of the previous offer, so why aren't they grabbing it with both hands?
And in fact, this is the second massive offering. So there have been 3 bids now, about 83 euros a share, about 90, and now 96 and change. So you're right, they're not jumping at it yet, although they are going to review the deal. It is a 50% premium, depending on how you value the bid. There's sort of a weird dividend part of this bid, so the two companies value it a little differently. The reason they haven't jumped at it yet, I think, in part has to do with the structure of the company. There's sort of it's odd to maybe Americans, but it's fairly normal to Dutch companies, something called a stichting.
Yes,
this is my favorite word of the day, or of several weeks now, because we've been focusing on this deal for a few weeks. But basically, the structure of the company is such that there's a certain foundation of owners of the company that control the votes, so that the tender shares, that basically the offer is for shares that have no voting control. So even if the company were to go hostile in this, and in fact, my colleague Ed Hammond just got off the phone with PPG CEO, who said if this offer is not accepted, he will in fact move forward and make a hostile bid if there's no discussion by June 1st. But there's still this stichting that controls the voting shares of this company, meaning that they don't really need to accept a deal unless it's so good that they really feel like the company can't get there on a standalone basis. So from a leverage standpoint here, I feel like Akzo Nobel feels like they still have the leverage, so there's no reason to just say, yes, good, done. Maybe they'll accept sort of okay, we'll let you do due diligence, and then maybe the final offer might be even higher than the offer we've seen.
Well, are we getting past the point of it being a good deal for PPG?
Well, PPG obviously doesn't think so.
Sorry, I mean Akzo.
So from Akzo's standpoint, again, I feel like they probably feel like they can get even more, and that's why we haven't seen a friendly deal reached at this point. Maybe they'll be able to get a little more. You'd have to wonder how far PPG is willing to push this thing again. From 83 originally all the way up to 96 and change, that's a big bump, and a 50% premium is pretty significant. We're probably getting to the end of the line here in terms of the frequency of raises, and that's sort of what the CEO was indicating, which is, look, if you guys don't engage here, we're just going to go straight to shareholders. And they think, by the way, that the stichting will eventually agree with shareholders because they have a fiduciary duty. And they're like, look, if all your shareholders sell your shares, that's probably the right thing to do for the company, is to sell the company.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What's precedent in Dutch company history? I mean, what has the stichting? I mean, by the way, it sounds like, you know, a cultish group within, you know, within the company.
It does.
Shareholder.
Or a European band name, perhaps.
Right, but it's not. It's just another part of the company ownership.
Correct, so. And it sort of operates as a poison pill defense. So I think historically, it's been a pretty good defense from hostile takeovers. And in fact, that's the whole purpose of it. So that companies can't go in. It's sort of a nationalism thing, keep these companies in-house and keep them, running in Holland. That said, there's certainly precedent for stichtings to say, you know what, this offer is sweet enough that we decide it is in the best shareholders. It is in the best interest of shareholders to sell the company.
So when will we know about the hostile bid? How long do they have to decide whether...
So again, if no discussions will happen until June 1st,
okay.
At that point, that's when the CEO says, expect us to move forward with a hostile bid.
Now I want to move on to the phone carrier space. And we use that term lightly these days, right? Because, how many of them really are just phone carriers anymore?
Sure.
So, Sprint, you're saying Wall Street, in the story today, there's on the Bloomberg, Wall Street is betting Sprint and T-Mobile will soon revise talks on a blockbuster merger. Seriously?
Well, we don't know, but that's probably the most likely scenario. So the world of telecommunications companies has been waiting for April 27th, which is later this week, because finally, telecom companies that have been participating in a wireless spectrum auction, which is basically the airwaves used to send signals from one place to another, either voice or data. Finally, this auction has ended. The quiet period is over, and now companies can talk to each other without having to get by this sort of anti-collusion thing, which was related to the auction. In other words, one company could say to another, hey, don't bid in this auction because I'm going to buy you, 2 months from now, and why raise the price? So that's why the companies haven't been able to talk to each other. Come April 27th, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, others that participated in this auction can finally start to speak to each other. So the number one thing that I think investors are looking at is, will T-Mobile and Sprint merge? How quickly will they start talking to each other? Is it possible that Dish Network could be involved there?
Well, they've got airwaves, but what else do they have?
They have a satellite TV, a dying satellite TV business. But look, AT&T bought DirecTV.
True.
So it's not particularly out of the realm of possibility that either It's probably not Sprint because Dish tried to buy Sprint a few years ago, but it's possible that T-Mobile could say, look, we think that this AT&T DirecTV merger where you're able to get wireless video, we think that makes some sense. Maybe we should get Dish's spectrum, merge the two companies together. That's possible, but I still feel like most investors think Sprint T-Mobile is the most likely combination to happen, but there's a lot of regulatory concerns with that deal.
This is true. We're out of time, but what will Lowell McAdam do?
And Lowell McAdam could do anything. He basically says the door's open. I'll take anyone's phone call. So if you're listening, call up Lowell McAdam. He might buy your